Hi there. My name's John Bishop, and I'm here with my very good friend, Dr. Nancy Flournoy. And so she will be giving a presentation today, shortly coming up. Just want to welcome everybody who's watching. And this is going to be a really interesting webinar on one of the Lifewave patches that I really love. It's called the Energy Enhancer patch. So what I'm going to do now is turn it over to Dr. Flournoy. Go ahead, Nancy.
Thank you, John. Oops, does everybody see that?
Yes, I can see that.
Can you see it now?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for having me here. I am going to talk today about the energy patch. Most of you who are tuning into this or will see it later are familiar somewhat with the Lifewave company and with their patches. And if you saw my video from last week, you saw an introduction to the whole patch system. We start this series this year with the energy patch, which was Lifewave's first patch. And it will give you a few exciting little stories about it in a bit. But what I have on the, first, let me say a bit about myself. So I have a PhD in biomathematics from the University of Washington. And I have spent my career decades designing methods for clinical trials. So I've worked in the medical scientific research environment for decades. And it really has been a lot of fun for me to learn about the biology and the physics of these patches and to research them and try and understand more about what they do. So this first slide shows you the envelope in which the patches come, and there's a month's supply in each set. And then also it shows you what the company is sort of legally able to advertise. So they are not a medicine, they do not go through the FDA, but they do have studies that they have to support the claims that they make. And I'll say more about the studies and what they actually have looked at as we go along. So with respect to the energy patch, they are pointing out that it's clinically proven to increase energy and endurance, and we'll see what that means. And the energy results that you get from using the patches are fast. And I will remind you that all of their patches are a proprietary form of phototherapy. That is, your body heat goes to the little bandage-like patch that's on your arm, and the crystal there reflects certain wavelengths back into your body to do certain things. So with that little introduction, again, this was their first patch. And so talking about the energy patch sort of brings us to talking about the history of the company. And David Schmidt, who's the CEO, got introduced to the head of the women's, the Stanford women's swim coach, Richard Quick. And he started using these patches on his swim team. And the 6 of the 8 members then just went right on to break their personal lifetime records. And the team took up the patches as a enhancer to their sports activities. And then on the other side of the slide here, I refer to the tennis player who was more recently seen wearing the patches at Wimbledon when she beat Venus Williams. So the favorite activity of those of us who sort of followed the patches and who pay attention to sports, which I don't really pay attention to sports, but now I see this as kind of a game, is to look at the Olympic athletes and find the patches on their little bodies here. And so one of the things that, in order to be able to do something on the Olympics, of course, you can't take drugs. And so they had to prove to the satisfaction of the Olympic Committee that nothing of an organic molecular, no organic molecules get transferred from these patches into the body. And so they were actually approved for use in the Olympics. Now, we're going to talk about energy. And one thing that, at least until I learned about these patches, when I think of energy, I think of adrenaline. I think of getting all hyped up and all wired up like you had too much coffee. And these patches are absolutely nothing like that. So let's start out by talking, this little slide on energy is right out of the Merriam-Webster dictionary. And they have sort of 4 different definitions. The top 2 are things that we think about all the time, like you think energy is strength and vitality, the strength and vitality that's required for doing some sustained physical or mental activity. You may think of your physical and mental powers as they're applied to particular tasks or energies. So all of that's kind of general, it feels like things we know, but nothing that's really getting your scientific mind around in terms of a real meaty definition. Energy is power derived from the utilization of physical or chemical resources, especially to provide light or heat or to work machines. Okay, so that's kind of getting closer to actually being able to do something. And then it's also a property of matter and radiation, which is manifest as a capacity to perform work. So it took me a little bit of, so energy is like a potential as opposed to actually doing the work. So in order to get energy into the body, we have to have the energy made in the body, and then we have to have the ability to transform that energy into the actual doing something. And so there's a number of steps that are important here. I've defined power up here as a contrast, which is the amount of energy transferred or converted per unit of time. So that gets a little closer to actually doing something. And then just in case you come back to this slide later and you want to pull off this website that's on the side here, I have, in the course of this research and some other research I was looking at, it's not hard to kind of go down a rabbit hole and find yourself in the realm of quantum physics because we start talking about the physical nature of energy, and energy as it's now established as being waves and or particles. And we're not going to go into that in this talk, but this particular author, Jim Al-Kahili, is at the University of Surrey in England, and he's done a PBS series. He has a whole bunch of videos for the layman that are really cleverly well done on quantum physics. And so if you want to go down that rabbit hole, I recommend him to you. Now, the energy patch is designed to, where is it going to get the energy? It's going to burn fat. It's designed to burn fat. And so one of the first things to notice is that we have 2 kinds of fat. We have beige fat and brown fat in our body. And the beige fat is under your skin and around your organs. And so it's more like protection as opposed to sitting there waiting to be burned so that you can conduct some activity. Whereas the brown fat is what your body's going to burn to create heat and maintain your body temperature and and use if you're doing strenuous activity. And the darker color here, so in the body, you tend to have about the same number of fat cells throughout your life. The question is how big they are and what's in them. And the darker color in these brown cells is due to having a lot more mitochondria, which we'll talk about more in a minute. And it's the mitochondria in the cell that's going to create the energy. So inside the mitochondria, which are inside every cell, their energy is produced in the form of what's molecule called ATP. And again, a molecule is like a chemical construct. Again, it's not really doing anything. It's a package. And the word metabolism, in particular, we're talking about metabolizing fat, not what you necessarily are eating at the moment, but metabolism is the chemical process of converting the fat molecules into energy. And there's I've got this broken down into 3 steps, each of which have lots of little steps, which we aren't going to go into all the detail because we would get lost, but sort of 3 major steps to get from the fat into actually doing something. So first, your fat, the most common fat in your system is triglycerides. And so the first step is to break the triglycerides and other fats down into glycerol and fatty acids. So that's getting them into a form where they can get fed into the Krebs cycle. And the Krebs cycle is the engine inside the molecule that produces the ATP. And the food that you eat and the fatty acids both go into the Krebs cycle. So once they get to that point, there's nothing different from metabolizing the fatty acids than for metabolizing the what it was you just had for lunch. But again, the ATP now is a molecule, and it's often referred to as energy, well, because energy is a potential. And what makes it a potential for doing something is that it carries a hydrogen atom. And we're going to see what that means in terms of actually having energy that you can use, because the ATP is going to release this hydrogen atom when and where it's needed. So the ATP is really kind of the carrier. It's gonna take this hydrogen atom to wherever it's needed to do something. So first step is to get from the triglycerides to the fatty acids. And so on the left-hand slide here, we have a couple of different little representations of the triglycerides. And it's a big molecule. It's got, look at the top one, it's got like 3 different acids that are individual acids that are all linked to this long chain of carbons and oxygens and hydrogens. So what you do to get the fatty acids is you just add water and an enzyme. So water and an enzyme, and this fatty acid breaks into 2 pieces. And what we need to go into the Krebs cycle is the fatty acids. So this picture on the left, just the blue outline is the cell wall of the mitochondria, and we're not going to look at the details inside, just look at the stars. So if you have the fatty acids on the outside, they have to get in, and then a lot of stuff has to happen, and then out pops the ATP at the bottom. And ATP, we're focusing on its use as an energy source. It's the main carrier of energy used for all cellular activities, but it also does signal transduction, it is involved in cell communication, and it's also involved in DNA synthesis. So you get the little ATP out the bottom, and now we just have a molecule, so it's not doing anything. Now, the ATP, where do you get the actual energy released so that it can be used for something? And that's when you break apart the ATG into pieces. And how do you do that? You add water. So you've got this long molecule now. When you end up with the ATG, there's this little table here of fact that you've got H for hydrogen, O for oxygen, P for phosphate, and for nitrogen. So you got this whole long chain of oxygens and carbons. The carbons they don't bother to mention, they're just contained in the lines. And then you have these rings that are solid. You're going to add water, and it's going to split the phosphate piece, this end piece, will split that off from the rest of it. And what happens when it does that, when it cleaves that off, is you end up with this charged hydrogen atom. And that's really where the energy is, because now you have a charged particle. And what's electricity? Electricity is the flow of charged particles. So you just get this stream now going, and all of a sudden you've created electricity. And with electricity, well, we may not understand without study how electricity goes to turn on the light or create heat or whatever, but you all have that in your everyday experience. And so once we get to electricity, you've got something that's going to work. Now, what's that got to do with our bodies? And so the aging is accompanied by a decline, or Dr. Schellenberger would say it's started by a decline in mitochondrial function. And he attributes the decline in mitochondrial function to a decline in energy production. And that decline is caused by two main things: a decrease in fatty acid utilization. Well, you got to be able to do all we just went through with the fatty acids, or you don't get any energy. And also a decreased oxidation efficiency, which is more related to digesting the food you ate as opposed to digesting the fat. So by boosting the energy available in the mitochondria, one has an anti-aging protocol that can help with whatever degeneracy is starting to appear as one gets older. So here is where the patches come in. So you have this recognition that decreasing the energy, that you want to stop this decrease in energy production, and you want to increase the energy production. And here comes the Lifewave patch, which is specifically designed to do that. And so the light waves that come off of the energy patch and are reflected back into your body are, I'll show you some results from the studies. It was designed to promote ATP production. And so that's pretty cool. So now this is the main study well, there's a couple of studies that are wrapped up with the results that are reported on this slide, but they did a formal study where they measured your oxygen intake and your carbon dioxide production, and they were able to actually measure how much energy, how much ATP you were getting in different ways through studies of that type. So they found after 1 week that the maximum aerobic ATP had significantly increased. And they actually found that it had significantly increased from fatty acid metabolism. So they were able to determine that it was actually burning fat and not just whatever sugar you had, from your recent candy bar or something. They also found that your resting ATP, when you're not exercising, that the ATP your body has just to say do healing, which is pretty important, was increased, and that it was increased from fatty acid metabolism. And I'm not sure what the last one is there. So all of these observations were consistent with the fact that their patch was doing what they claimed it would do. And let me just say, this is after using the patch for a week that they made these observations. This was in 2011, these studies. Now, they did, you'll see as we talk about these studies over time that one of the challenges is to find the piece of laboratory equipment that's going to measure something that's relevant to what they're trying to determine. So we'll go through several other studies just briefly, and we have to refer to the piece of equipment that they did because most of them are non-standard. So this is called a heat map. We have a person here where we have on the left, we have the front and the back of the person on the left and the right. And the left is the pre the patching and the right is post the patching. And there's a scale down here on the bottom you can't see particularly well, but it goes from like 24 degrees is a deep blue, and this is centigrade. 35 degrees is the deep purple, like on the back of the person on the left here. And so what one's looking at here is actually heat measurements. How much did the body cool? So if you're thinking of being inflamed and the fact that it might take some energy to move that inflammation out of your body and make you feel better, this demonstrates, and there's dozens of pictures like this, this demonstrates, it's an example in a single individual of the cooling effect on an inflamed body that the patch, the energy patch will have. These images were taken with a thermal imaging processing camera. I think that's all we need to see about this. So this, yeah, that's all I'll say here. So there's another study that involves the heart rate. And this is where I found it was so interesting, because before I started reading about this particular research, I was thinking, okay, we want our heart to be nice and steady. We want it to, we want all those heart waves that you see when you get an EKG, they should all look nicely, And what one learns by reading the literature a little more deeply is that one wants a lot of variability in the heart rate. And so what they refer to as heart rate here is actually a ratio of high frequencies to low frequencies. And what they want is a lot of variability. High variability is good. And that's consistent with the idea that for your body to be healthy, it sort of has to be practically on the verge of chaos. It has to be ready to respond to whatever gets thrown at it. And that low heart rate variability is a sign of stagnation and of being stuck. So high variability is good. And in the tests that were done on the, I've got 2 papers cited below, and I've got some citations at the end of the screen, which if you go back to the PowerPoint presentation or the video, you can look at in more detail. But the energy enhancers patch were just seen to increase heart rate variability. And then this next couple of lines were very, I'll tell you a story about them. So the second one is kind of what you might think, if increasing heart rate variability is good, that during exercise, this enhances activity. What was surprising to me is that during rest, this enhances relaxation. So now I'll tell you a couple of stories about personal use of the energy patch. So with respect to enhancing activity, my cat had a stroke a few weeks ago, and she couldn't walk straight. Her whole mouth was paralyzed. I was feeding her beef broth and Pediasure with a syringe. I had to force it into the side of her mouth because she couldn't open it. And we were going, oh my goodness, this cat is 20 years old, but we were saying, you know, this is it, it's over. And I took 4 sets of energy patches and put them down the sides of her back. And then, I don't know, I might have thrown in 1 or 2 other things. But I got down the sides of the back idea from videos that the company shows about how to treat horses. And it very quickly said the cat just went like this whole wiggle. And, you know, she's a little gimpy on the right leg, but she basically recovered. It was totally stunning. So, so that was cool. And then on the other side here, this during rest enhances relaxation. Now I can't remember where I got this idea, but there was something in my life or my husband's life, I forget who, it might have been his, because at any rate, I was encouraged to put the energy patches on, you know, those little night shades you get for sleeping, like if you're on an airplane for a long trip or something, and you can put the little pads over your eyes. And so I put the tan patch on the left and the white patch on the right, like we're taught to do, and used them at night when I went to sleep. And this is where I really got the sense of energy, not adrenaline, and energy for healing, as opposed to, you know, the primary sales stuff for the patches is, you know, you can go run a marathon. But if you've got some healing to do, then there's other things that you need energy for. So what was really amazing about this is I thought, first it was like radical to think that you're going to use an energy patch when you go to bed and go to sleep. And I thought, well, is it going to keep me up? And no, it absolutely didn't. It was so amazing. It was just like this soothing calmness going into my brain and in my head and my face. And it was really wonderful. Now, Lifewave instructs us all not to use the patches for more than 12 hours at a time. And that's because you attenuate to them. You know, your body will get used to it and quit listening. So, but we also are taught that the patches will go through clothing. So, you know, typically you put the patch right on your skin, but in this case, and what you can do with your clothing is put the patch on this, the nightshades that I had. And so the kind of open question is then, how long can you leave them on the overnight patches, the overnight shades? Because you can take, you know, you can wear those for however long you're in bed and take them off. And then you can come back the next night and put them on again. And I mean, eventually the crystal should wear down and dissipate, but I don't know how long that happens. I haven't heard anything on that fact yet. And my doctor, my physician, who my husband and I took the patches to, and she now uses them regularly. She says she just uses the same, she has not changed them on her pads at all. She just uses the same patch every night when she puts it on to go to bed. So anyway, that's an interesting observation and an open question. So those are two energy patch stories. Now we have this other way of measuring what's going on in your body, which is the machine's called an Auramed biopulsar reflexograph. And the it's electrons, and what's non-standard, I mean, what makes this different than the standard things you would get when you get electrodes linked up to you in a medical environment, you go in for an EKG or an EEG, is the equipment needs to measure very low frequencies. So when we're talking about energy movement at the level that we're talking about, we're looking at low frequency transfers, and the standard medical equipment is not set up to do those measurements. So this, you can look this up. I've got the website of the company here on the left. And what they particularly do is look at whether your chakras are measuring at, from 10 to 100% efficiency, or whether they're, whether you've got a lot of energy or whether it's being depleted. And with all the links and the wires, they measure up to, they show 49 different systems in your body, all in real time. And this is what it looks like. And again, okay, we have a before with all the purple in it, and a after without, and we have this little image of a person mapped over where the person actually was standing. And the difference between the two graphs is 4 hours. And the dark blue and the violet and white indicate blockages, and the nice little turquoise means that you're more in balance. And so you can definitely see that there's an effect. And again, the company has, a number of these, and the paper that this quoted from has a number of images of this type. So when I saw this, I thought, how in the world are they actually making this picture? Because I think, you got all your electrodes, you got measurements being taken every place they have an electrode stuck on your body. And how do you get from that number to this smoothed over fuzzy looking picture? And David gave us that answer then at one point. He said that, so they actually have the individual measurements at the places where they had the electrons, and those get associated with a color. The intensity of the measurement is associated with a color. And then they just make it out of focus. And that's how it all blurs together. And I thought, wow, okay, answers that question. So this is the kind of graphs they put out. This is the heart. You see the red line comes up and levels out, but it levels out way above the green line, which which represents balance. And so that's too much energy. And if the line dips down like it does up here, then there's too little energy. And you have before patching and after patching, and it's got all these organs on it. So you get a lot of information. I think this is the last, I think this is the last study I'm going to talk about. That there's this piece of equipment called a Acuscope. And it is measuring the resistance in energy along your skin, which your skin is going to conduct electricity. And they're looking, and in this study, Thomas and Helen Budzynski were looking at how the energy, so one strategy is to put the patches on acupuncture sites, because that'll take the energy and suck it, quickly into your energy system. So they were using this piece of equipment to see if they could trace the resistance of the energy along the meridian sites, and then also looking before and after with respect to using the energy patching. Now, I was particularly excited to come across these scientists. Thomas has passed away. He was on the faculty at the University of Washington it was either engineering or bioengineering. So most of this equipment and all is coming out of the engineering fields, not the medical fields. And Helen, his wife, has a PhD in psychology. And so the studies, I'm not reporting on them here, but the studies they did also involved a lot of cognitive questions and answers. And she was responsible for making sure they were using standardized questions and standardized tests. So Thomas, this work of theirs introduced me to the Bohong ducts, which I talked about last week in my introduction, which run inside the lymph sites and which are thought to be the physical manifestation of the meridians. And it really, and the stuff I had read about those previously had been, as I say, like from China and from Italy and universities that I don't know how to, I don't know how to calibrate their prestige. But the University of Washington, there's no question about that being a top leading university. And Thomas, and so this was the first time I found a recognition of this work that from a major US institution. And Thomas was definitely, well, he was making comments like the theory should be standardized and become common any day now. But of course, this was in 2009, so things move slowly. Anyway, that's all about this piece of equipment. And they did two sets of measurements. They looked at measurements along the skin, right on the surface. And then they looked at measurements that were measuring the conductance properties at a deeper level to see if there was difference. And I just pulled out a couple of slides of the results. So here we have the lung, the pericardium, the stomach, and the kidney, and notice those numbers after it. So these are acupuncture sites. And in each case, we're looking at conductance on the skin in the case of this slide. And you have the average measurements in microohms before on the left and after on the right. And in every case, the average increases, and the increase was significant in all cases except the kidney. And the sample size is not very big. I forget what it was here, but to get, one might well imagine that, oh no, actually it is fairly sizable. It's 60. But at any rate, 3 out of 4, and there could be something special about the kidney, I don't know. They showed the change in concordance. Now, when they look deeper, it makes you think that there's something strange about the kidney or something different about the kidney, because the kidney actually goes in the opposite direction. And so this is the deep measurement of accordance, and the lung is also decreasing instead of increasing, but increases and not such big increases in both the pericardium and the stomach. So those are the kinds of studies that they have been doing. And what I didn't tell you, what I alluded to, but I didn't really tell you about was give you any data on, was their attempt to trace these changes across the meridians. But they were interested in meshing the Western energy medicine as with with the Chinese ideas of energy. And so that's what they did. And their conclusion was that, in fact, the skin concordance does indeed follow the tracings of the meridians in the acupuncture sites. And then finally, they're concluding the patches that they have established that the patches are shown to serve as a stimulus for the action for which they're developed. That is, the light is a communicator for specific frequencies that are driven as if you actually had a bioelectrical stimulus that runs from the patch site along the meridians to the targeted site in the body. And that it does this with the effect of realizing a positive change in the body's function. So a bunch of references, and all the references are on the Lifewave website. A disclaimer, which is that Lifewave is not claiming to cure any particular disease, and that you should discuss such things with your doctor. I made sure I have a doctor for whom I can discuss these things. Not everybody may be so lucky. And so these patches are for normal well-being to facilitate your own healing. And with that, I will call my talk to a close, and just remind you, I put the patches on myself, I put them on my husband, I put them on my cat, and I hope you enjoy them too.